Bring her to me. Matteo Bellandi's first command was so quiet that the 12 armed men in his office leaned forward to hear it. His security chief remained beside the closed door, holding the evidence inside a clear plastic sleeve, one broken eyeglass arm, a brass coat button, and a dark smear on the concrete floor of the underground parking garage. "Boss," Gabriel said carefully, "we don't know who has her yet." Matteo looked down at the broken glasses. He had seen Evelyn Hart push them up her nose 1,000 times while studying payroll reports. He had watched her do it during meetings where men talked over her, during late nights, when the docs should have been silent, and 3 days earlier when his own cousin had called her an overweight payroll clerk in front of the entire executive council. Matteo had said nothing then. Now one lens was cracked. "Bring her to me," he roared. The windows trembled. "I don't care whose door you have to break down. I don't care which captain thinks he is protected. Shut every gate. Freeze every private account. And stop every vehicle leaving the waterfront. Evelyn Hart comes home alive." No one moved. Matteo planted both hands on the conference table and looked at the men who had followed him through 13 years of blood, funerals, betrayals, and uneasy peace. "If any man in this city helped take her," he said, his voice dropping again, "his protection ended the moment she disappeared." Gabriel gave a single nod. The office emptied in seconds. Matteo remained alone with the broken glasses. At 42. Evelyn Hart was the kind of woman powerful men forgot while benefiting from everything she did. She was full-figured, with calm brown eyes, practical shoes, and dark hair. She usually pinned at the back of her neck with 2 plain silver clips. She wore fitted cardigans over sensible blouses, never raised her voice, and never arrived later than 7:20 in the morning. Her official title was Senior Payroll Compliance Specialist for Bellandi Maritime Holdings. Her actual job was keeping 1,800 people from discovering how close the company came to collapse every Friday. Evelyn corrected scheduling errors before the unions saw them. She caught duplicate invoices before vendors were paid twice. She rebuilt pension contributions after executives borrowed from accounts they had no right to touch. When a captain promised overtime the company could not afford, Evelyn found the money without shorting the men who had earned it. 3 departments used systems she had designed. 6 managers presented reports built from her work. Matteo's cousin Adrian received praise for every clean quarter. Evelyn received emails asking why one employee's reimbursement was 12 hours late. Matteo knew she was reliable. He knew payroll failed whenever she took a sick day. He knew his managers stopped answering questions when she entered a room because they expected her to solve the problem after everyone else left. But he had never asked why. He had treated her competence like electricity in the walls necessary, dependable, and not worth noticing until the lights went out. Now, the entire Bellandi waterfront was going dark. At 8 that morning, payroll had failed to clear. At 9, 2 fuel vendors suspended service. Bit 10, the pension transfer for 400 retired dock workers was still sitting unapproved. At 10:15, Evelyn's assistant found her handbag beneath her desk. At 10:30, Gabriel pulled security footage from the parking garage. The video showed Evelyn walking toward her car at 8:47 the previous night. A black utility van entered the frame. The camera froze for 17 seconds. When the image returned, the van was gone. So was Evelyn. Matteo stared at the city beyond the glass. For 3 years, he had known the sound of her footsteps outside his office. He had known which tea she ordered from the cafe downstairs. He had known she loosened her hair when she worked past sunset and rubbed the base of her thumb when she was worried. He had noticed everything that allowed him to want her privately. He had noticed nothing that might have protected her publicly. His phone rang. "Tell me." "We found her car," Gabriel said. "South end of the freight district. Driver's door was open. No phone. No blood. Cameras disabled. Who had access? Security administration, executive operations, and finance. Finance meant Adrian. The possibility entered Matteo's mind like a blade, but he did not allow it to settle. Adrian Bellandi was his cousin, his chief financial officer, and one of the few men permitted to authorize transactions without Matteo's signature. They had grown up in the same guarded houses. They had buried fathers in the same family plot. Adrian was arrogant and cruel when he believed cruelty would impress a room. He was also ambitious. 3 days earlier, Adrian had humiliated Evelyn during the quarterly council meeting. She had entered carrying a red payroll folder and waited near the far end of the table while Adrian explained a $12 million expansion plan. When he finished, she had cleared her throat. "There is a problem with the labor projections for Pier 9. Adrian had not looked at her. There is always a problem when payroll enters a room. Several men laughed. Evelyn held the folder against her chest. The expansion assumes 6 months of continuous operation. But Pier 9 has no active nighttime permit. The overtime records attached to your proposal show 63 workers completing night shifts there. Adrian finally turned. And the pier has been closed after dark for 9 years. The laughter stopped. Evelyn placed the folder on the table. These employees are receiving wages, assurance contribution, and pension credits for shifts that could not have occurred. Adrian leaned back in his chair. Are you accusing executive finance of fraud? I'm saying the records require an independent review. You are saying numbers. You do not understand. Frighten you. I understand every number in that folder. Adrian smiled without warmth. Then perhaps you should return to your basement office and make sure the secretaries receive their checks. Evelyn's expression had not changed. But Matteo saw the small movement of her hand as she pressed one thumb into the opposite palm. He should have asked her to continue. Instead, he looked at the impatient captains around the table and chose convenience. Leave the folder, he said. Adrian will review it. Evein Metishgaze. For one quiet second, disappointment replaced the professional calm in her eyes. Then she removed her identification badge from the table, picked up the folder, and said, "The original does not leave my custody." Adrian's face hardened. Matteo noticed that too. He still let her walk out alone. Now, Matteo called Gabriel back. Find out where Adrian was last night. There was a pause. He says he was at the Harbor Club until midnight. Do not ask him again. Verify it. And if he is lying, Matteo looked at Evelyn's broken glasses. Bring him in breathing. The search expanded across Boston. Bellandi guards closed warehouse exits. Drivers checked service roads. Union representatives received photographs and instructions. Bartenders who normally saw nothing suddenly remembered black vans, familiar men, and an argument outside a private garage. Matteo went to Evelyn's office himself. It was smaller than the storage room beside it. There was no window. 2 monitors occupied most of the narrow desk. Paper files filled the shelves from floor to ceiling, each labeled in Evelyn's precise handwriting. On the wall hung a framed certificate for 20 years of professional service. No executive had signed it. Matteo sat in her chair. Her tea from the previous night remained beside the keyboard. It had gone cold. A tiny crescent of rose-colored lipstick marked the rim. Near the monitor was an opened envelope from Halpern Risk and Audit in Providence. Matteo read the letter twice. They had offered Evelyn a director's position, a salary nearly double what Bellandi Maritime paid her, relocation expenses, and independent authority over compliance operations. She had signed the acceptance page. Her final day with Bellandi Maritime was supposed to be Friday. Matteo closed his eyes. She had been leaving. The realization hurt in a place he had trained himself not to possess. He had imagined Evelyn remaining in the same basement office indefinitely, steady and reachable. While he continued watching from a safe distance, he had told himself distance protected her from his world. The truth was uglier. Distance had allowed him to desire her without risking rejection. While her labor continued serving him, a notification appeared on her screen. Payroll authorization. Locked 3 failed executive attempts. Matteo stood. Gabriel. His security chief entered immediately. Someone tried to release a payroll batch after Evelyn disappeared. Matteo said, 3 times. Whose authorization? The screen doesn't say. Gabriel studied the notice. Can our technology team open it? Not without resetting the system. Evelyn designed the lock. Gabriel looked around the packed shelves. Then she may have left us something. They searched for 20 minutes and found nothing. Matteo was about to call in specialists when he noticed the desk calendar. Every weekday contained Evelyn's neat notes, except Monday. Monday's square held only 4 numbers. 4179. It isn't a date, Gabriel said. Matteo remembered a conversation from 2 years earlier. A winter storm had flooded an electrical room, shutting down half the waterfront. Executives had panicked. Evelyn had walked into Matteo's office, placed a handwritten list on his desk, and calmly told him which workers needed emergency checks. How did you reach them? He had asked. The old payroll helpline. She said, Extension 4179. It still runs through the analog service network. New management forgot it exists. Matteo seized the office phone and dialed. The line rang once. A recorded voice answered. This is the Bellandi payroll assistance line. For payment questions, leave your employee number and callback information. Then came 7 seconds of silence. A faint mechanical sound clicked in the background. A ferry horn followed. Matteo played it again. The North Channel. Gabriel said, That horn sequence belongs to the municipal ferry. There are no Bellandi facilities on the North Channel. There is the old customs inspection station. Adrian leased it through finance before the city condemned it. Matteo was already moving. Rain covered the harbor in a grey veil as 3 Bellandi vehicles crossed the bridge toward the abandoned customs station. Matteo sat in the first SUV with a pistol beneath his coat and Evelyn's signed job offer folded inside his pocket. He did not pray. He had not believed anyone listened since his mother died. But with every mile, one thought repeated beneath the controlled rhythm of his breathing. Let her be alive. The customs station stood behind a rusted gate at the edge of the channel. Most of its windows had been boarded over. One yellow security light burned above the loading entrance. Gabriel raised a hand. The vehicles stopped before reaching the gate. 2 men outside. He said, Possibly more inside. Take them quietly. Matteo, I am going in. You are the head of the family. She is in there because I failed to listen. That does not make you bulletproof. No. Matteo opened the door. It makes me responsible. The first guard surrendered when Gabriel's men surrounded the gate. The second reached for his waistband and was disarmed before he could draw. Neither man would say who had hired them. Inside, the building smelled of damp concrete and old machinery. Matteo moved through a corridor lined with empty inspection rooms. The ferry horn sounded again, louder now, shaking dust from the ceiling. At the end of the hall, he found a steel door secured with an electronic lock. A man's voice came through the wall. "You can leave when you authorize the batch." Evelyn answered, faint but unmistakable, "No." Matteo stopped breathing. Another voice said, "You think Bellandi will come for you? He let Adrian throw you out of his own meeting. I know what he did." "Then sign." "No." A sharp sound followed. Matteo's vision narrowed. Gabriel touched his shoulder. "We open the door together." Matteo stepped back. Gabriel placed a device against the lock. 2 seconds later, the light changed from red to green. The door opened. One guard stood beside a metal table. Another was near the far wall. Both men froze when they saw Matteo move away from her. He said. The first man lifted his hands. The second made the mistake of reaching inside his coat. Gabriel stopped him before Matteo had to. Then the room became silent. Evelyn sat on the floor beneath a radiator. One wrist secured to a pipe with a plastic restraint. Her blouse was torn at the shoulder. Her dark hair had fallen loose around her face. A bruise shadowed her left cheek. Her lower lip was split. One lens remained in her glasses. The other side of the frame was missing. Matteo had imagined this moment during the drive. He had believed he would feel rage, relief, or the clean focus that had carried him through every crisis of his adult life. Instead, something inside him gave way. His pistol slipped from his hand and struck the concrete. "Evelyn," she lifted her head. For 1 second, she stared as if she did not trust what she saw. Then she whispered, "You found the extension." Matteo crossed the room and dropped to his knees. He reached for the restraint, but his hands were shaking too badly to release it. Gabriel crouched beside him and cut the plastic. Evelyn's freed hand fell into Matteo's palm. Her fingers were cold. He raised them to his forehead and closed his eyes. The first tear reached his jaw before he realized he was crying. "I am sorry," he said. Evelyn watched him with exhausted confusion. Matteo Bellandi had stood without emotion while men threatened his life. He had buried his father, 2 uncles, and the brother who had died protecting him. People called him Stone because they had never seen him bend. Now his shoulders shook as he held the hand of the woman he had failed. "I should have listened," he said. "I should never have let you leave that room alone. Matteo, I knew Adrian was cruel. I knew you were afraid of something. I saw it. And I chose not to ask, because the answer would have disrupted my meeting." Her eyes filled. "You came. I should have come before you needed rescue." He looked at the bruise on her cheek and had to turn his face away. Not because the injury was unbearable to see, but because it exposed the cost of every silence he had mistaken for restraint. Evelyn touched his sleeve. "I need my shoe." Matteo looked down. One of her shoes lay near the table. Gabriel retrieved it. Evelyn pulled back the inner lining with trembling fingers. Beneath it was a folded strip of red carbon paper, the original batch authorization. She said, "They searched my bag and my clothes. They didn't check beneath the insole." Matteo stared at the paper. "You protected this while they hurt you. I protected 1,800 workers and 400 pensioners." Her voice weakened. "The batch moves at midnight. Adrian has been creating ghost employees on Pier 9. He used their wages to buy captains and move pension money into private accounts." Gabriel took the document carefully. "Is this enough to prove it?" "It is if the council lets me explain it." Matteo looked at her. "They will." Evelyn's gaze hardened, despite her exhaustion. "You don't explain it for me." "No. You don't call me your employee and make this disappear inside the family." "No. And you do not kill Adrian before the pension money is recovered." Matteo's anger pressed against his ribs. But he heard the boundary beneath her words. The old version of him would have promised vengeance. The man kneeling before her understood that vengeance would only replace her voice with his rage. "The decision will be yours," he said. Evelyn studied him for a long moment. Then her strength failed. Matteo caught her before she struck the floor. Her body settled against his chest. Softer and heavier than the fragile image he had carried privately. She immediately tensed. "I can stand. I know." "Then put me down." He loosened his arms at once. The movement surprised her. Matteo rested one hand behind her shoulder without lifting her. "Tell me what you need." Evelyn looked toward the door. "A doctor, my own clothes, and no one touching the payroll system until I decide whether I'm helping you. You have my word." "Your word did not protect me in that meeting." The sentence landed without mercy. Matteo accepted it. "Then I will prove it." At the private clinic, Evelyn refused to allow Bellandi guards inside the examination room. Matteo sent them into the hallway. She refused the dress and jewelry, a staff member brought from one of his family's boutiques. Matteo had the items removed and sent Gabriel to Evelyn's apartment for her own clothes. She refused to stay at Matteo's estate unless the doors remained unlocked, and she kept her phone. He gave her every key, placed her phone in her hand, and ordered security never to block her path. For the first time since he had taken control of the Bellandi organization, Matteo gave orders designed to limit his own power. The doctor confirmed that Evelyn had 2 bruised ribs, a mild concussion, and injuries that would heal with rest. Nothing required surgery. Matteo listened from the hallway and felt no relief. The absence of permanent damage did not erase what had happened. When the doctor left, Evelyn sat in a private recovery room, wearing dark trousers and a cream blouse Gabriel had collected from her apartment. Her hair was tied back again, though one silver clip had been lost. Matteo stood outside the open door. "May I come in?" She looked up. He had never asked permission to enter a room in a building he owned. "Yes." Matteo stepped inside, but did not approach the bed. Gabriel had placed the red carbon authorization inside a sealed evidence sleeve on the table between them. Evelyn followed Matteo's gaze. "Adrian can alter the electronic record," she said. "He cannot alter that." "What makes it different?" "Our payroll system still prints 3 pressure copies whenever an executive authorizes a batch above $2 million. White goes to finance. Yellow goes to the bank courier. Red goes to compliance. Why? Use paper in a digital system because your grandfather trusted paper more than passwords. Despite everything." Matteo almost smiled. "That sounds like him." Adrian deleted the electronic approval and replaced it with my credentials. But the red copy holds the impression from his authorization stamp and the original sequence number, and that proves he created the ghost employees. It proves his stamp approved the batch, the employee list printed on the same continuous sheet. Why? Pier 9. Because the pier is still active in the old payroll tables, even though nighttime operations ended years ago. Adrian assumed no one would compare the shift code with municipal permit history. But you did. I compare everything. Matteo looked around the quiet room. "How long have you been catching his errors?" "They weren't errors." "How long?" 14 months. His jaw tightened. "Why did you not come to me sooner?" Evelyn's expression changed. "I did." Matteo remembered emails delegated to Adrian. Requests, returned with comments from junior managers, and the red folder he had refused to open. She continued. "I requested 3 meetings. Your office sent me back to finance. I documented 5 impossible shifts. Adrian said I was creating conflict because I resented successful men, and I allowed him to control the review." "Yes?" Matteo lowered his eyes. He could have defended himself. He could have explained that two rival families had been testing his territory, that regulators were examining the shipping company, or that his aunt's illness had required private care. All of it was true. None of it changed what Evelyn had endured. "I failed you," he said. She looked at him with tired caution. "You failed the system. I was simply the person standing underneath it when it fell." "No. I failed you specifically." The room remained quiet. Matteo stepped closer to the table. "I knew Adrian dismissed your work. I knew other executives took credit for your reports. I noticed the way they spoke to you. And I said nothing, because your department continued functioning." Evelyn folded her hands. "Why are you admitting this now?" "Because telling you I love you would be meaningless if I refused to name what I did." Her head lifted sharply. Matteo had not planned to speak the words. For 3 years, he had hidden them behind brief conversations, unnecessary walks through the payroll floor, and silent concern that asked nothing of him. Now there was no respectable way to hide. "I love you," he said. "I have for longer than I deserve to say." Evelyn stared at him. "You barely know me. I know how you take your tea. I know you stay late on Thursdays, because direct deposits clear Friday morning. I know you keep peppermints in your second drawer for employees who arrive frightened about missing wages. I know you sent flowers to Gabriel's wife after her surgery and signed the card from the entire office so no one would know they came from you. That isn't knowing me." "No." Matteo accepted the correction. "It is watching you. Knowing you would have required me to step out of the shadows and let you judge me. And you did not want that. I was afraid your judgment would be accurate." For the first time, some of the tension left Evelyn's face. Matteo reached into his coat and placed the Halpern risk and audit letter beside the evidence sleeve. "I found this in your office." Her mouth tightened. "You searched my desk. I was looking for a clue to where they had taken you. I had no right to read beyond that. My new position begins in 9 days. I know. I accepted before the council meeting. I know. I am still leaving." The old instinct rose inside him. The instinct to solve loss by closing doors, increasing guards, and offering enough money to make departure impractical. "Matteo, let it pass. A car will take you anywhere you choose," he said. "Your full severance has already been transferred. Gabriel is preparing a written statement, clearing you of any responsibility for today's payroll failure. No Bellandi employee will follow you." Suspicion entered her eyes. "You are letting me take the evidence. It belongs in your custody. You need it." "Yes. And if I leave, Adrian may take control of the council tonight." "Yes. Then why would you let me go?" Matteo met her gaze. "Because if you stay only because I control the doors, Adrian will not be the only man in my family who treated you as property." Evelyn's eyes glistened. She looked away before he could decide what it meant. A knock sounded against the open door. Gabriel waited outside. "Matteo, the captains are assembling early." "How early? 7 tonight." Adrian told them the payroll failure proves you have lost control. He is calling for an emergency succession vote. Evelyn checked the clock. It was almost 3. Gabriel continued. "The pension bank has also received instructions to close the retired workers' fund at midnight and consolidate it under executive finance." Evelyn swung her feet toward the floor. Pain crossed her face. Matteo moved instinctively, then stopped before touching her. "What do you need?" "My shoes?" "You are not going to that meeting in this condition." Her gaze turned cold. That sounded like an order. Matteo forced his hand away from the back of the chair. "You're right. It was. I have spent 20 years watching executives decide that my body makes me fragile and my job makes me unimportant. Do not rescue me from one locked room and place me in another. I do not want you hurt again. Then ask, what would make me safe? The answer cost him less than it once would have. What would make you safe? A doctor's written clearance. Gabriel beside me until we reached the council chamber. The evidence in my hands, and your promise that no one speaks for me. You have all four. Evelyn stood carefully. Matteo watched her test her balance. You have a signed offer in Providence. He said, a car can take you there now. You do not owe these men anything. I know. You do not owe me anything. I know that too. Then why go back? Evelyn lifted the evidence sleeve. Because Adrian did not steal from you alone. He took pension money from men who unloaded ships for 40 years. He took insurance contributions from families who believed their coverage was active. If he wins tonight, he will call the missing money a union accounting error. And the people with the least power will carry the blame. She slipped the document into a plain leather folder. I am not returning because you ordered me back. I am returning because he expects me to run. Matteo felt something shift inside him. He had believed power meant making other people stay. Evelyn showed him that loyalty had value only when departure remained possible. At 6:45. The Bellandi Council gathered in the top-floor ballroom of the Harbour Crown Hotel. The room had hosted weddings, political dinners, and memorials for men whose deaths were never fully explained. Tonight, 22 captains sat around a long walnut table, while attorneys, financial advisors, and security personnel stood along the walls. Adrian occupied the chair to Matteo's right. He wore a charcoal suit and an expression of practiced concern. We cannot continue without leadership. He told the room, payroll has failed. Fuel contracts are suspended, and the pension bank has frozen its transfer. Matteo's personal attachment to an unstable employee has created an operational crisis. Several captains murmured. Adrian raised a folder. Evelyn Hart accessed restricted accounts before disappearing. Her credentials authorized more than $4 million in fraudulent wages. The ballroom doors opened. Every head turned. Evelyn entered first. She wore the same cream blouse and dark trousers Gabriel had brought from her apartment. The bruise on her cheek remained visible. One side of her glasses had been repaired with a narrow strip of black tape. She carried no designer handbag and wore no clothing, chosen to transform her into someone more acceptable to the room. She looked exactly like the woman they had ignored. Gabriel walked 3 steps behind her. Matteo entered last. Adrian's face lost color. Evelyn crossed the ballroom slowly. No one spoke as she reached the table. The chair nearest the door was empty. An assistant motioned toward it. Evelyn did not sit. Adrian recovered first. This is highly irregular. Matteo removed his coat. So was abducting my payroll specialist. A ripple moved through the room. Adrian gave a controlled laugh. You cannot possibly be accusing me, based on whatever story she invented. I am not presenting the accusation. Matteo said. He looked at the captains. You will listen to Miss Hart? Adrienne Rose. She is an employee. Evelyn placed the leather folder on the table. No, she said. As of Friday, I am the incoming Director of Compliance at Halpern Risk and Audit. The statement struck the room harder than a shout. Adrian glanced at Matteo, expecting contradiction. None came. Evelyn continued. I am here voluntarily. I have not withdrawn my resignation. And I am not acting under Mr. Bellandi's authority. A senior captain named Salvatore Marino leaned forward. Then, why are you here? Because 400 retired workers will lose access to their pension fund at midnight if this council accepts the consolidation order submitted by Executive Finance. Adrian scoffed. The consolidation protects those funds. It transfers them into an account controlled by you. As Chief Financial Officer, as the secondary beneficiary of 3 holding companies receiving ghost payroll transfers, Adrian's expression hardened. Do you have evidence? Or only resentment? Evelyn opened the folder and removed the red carbon authorization. This is the evidence. One captain laughed uncertainly. A piece of old paper, the electronic payroll system, can be altered by an administrator. Evelyn said, "This cannot." She placed the sheet beneath the ballroom's document camera. The image appeared on 2 large screens behind the table. Rows of employee numbers filled the page. At the bottom was a pressure mark from an executive authorization stamp. Evelyn pointed to the top corner. Batch. Sequence. 71B. 4,312,000. 63 employees assigned to Pier 9. Night rotation. Adrian spread his hands. All approved labor. Pier 9 has not held a nighttime operating permit since September 17th. 9 years ago. Maintenance crews still work there. They do. 6 employees. Twice. Monthly. Not 63 employees. 5 nights a week. She moved her finger down the list. These are not random identities. Each ghost employee is attached to a benefit profile. Wages were transferred to private accounts. Pension contributions were routed to 3 holding companies. Those companies then issued consulting payments to 6 council captains. The men around the table began studying one another. Adrian's voice sharpened. She could have created this document herself. No. Evelyn said. Why not? Because compliance receives the red pressure copy only after Executive Finance stamps the white original. When you authorize the batch, the stamp struck through all 3 sheets. She adjusted the document beneath the camera. The electronic version currently shows my password. This paper carries the physical impression from your numbered authorization seal. Adrian looked toward the legal advisors. Evelyn did not allow him time to recover. The impression is not the only thing you missed. She pointed to a faint line beneath the employee list. Every payroll batch includes the previous batch's closing sequence. This document follows the legitimate Friday payroll I released at 4:06 p.m. Your fraudulent batch began 11 minutes later. Adrian slammed one palm against the table. You expect this council to accept technical claims from a woman who allowed payroll to collapse. The insult no longer landed the way he intended. Evelyn faced the room. Payroll collapsed because I locked executive authorization after 3 attempts were made using my credentials while I was being held at the old custom station. Several captains looked at Adrian. He remained standing. She has no proof I was involved in her disappearance. The men guarding the station used a facility leased through your office, Gabriel said from the wall. Adrian turned on him. Matteo's voice cut through the room. She is speaking. The 3 words carried no threat. They did not need one. Adrian sat. Evelyn returned to the document. For 14 months, I corrected shortages created by these ghost accounts. I moved legitimate operating reserves to keep union checks from failing. I delayed vendor payments to protect employee insurance. I rebuilt pension contribution files after finance removed them. A captain frowned. You concealed the losses I prevented workers from paying for them, while I documented the cause. Who authorized you? No one. Then why do it? Because people had already performed the work. Their families should not lose rent money because executives considered payroll beneath their attention. The captain looked down. Evelyn continued. If I had stopped correcting the system 3 months ago, The fuel service would have ended. Insurance coverage would have lapsed. And every person in this room would have known something was wrong, because I kept it functioning. Executive finance was able to pretend the organization was healthy. Silence settled over the ballroom. This time, it was not the silence of dismissal. It was the silence of men recalculating the value of the woman before them. Salvatore Marino tapped the table. Which captains received the consulting payments? Evelyn looked at him. Before I answer, I want every man here to understand something. Some of those payments were hidden inside legitimate distributions. Receiving one does not prove a captain knew where the money originated. The room shifted again. She was not using the evidence for revenge. She was protecting the accuracy of the conclusion, even when a more dramatic accusation would have served her. Salvatore nodded once. Continue. Evelyn read 6 account references. 3 captains immediately denied, knowing the source. 2 remained silent. The 6th, a younger man named Carlo Rizzi, stood and faced Adrian. You said the money came from expansion profits. Adrian's composure fractured. I stabilized the council. Matteo was allowing sentiment to weaken the family. You paid us with pension money. I moved resources where they were needed. Evelyn looked at the attorneys. The midnight consolidation order gives Adrian sole control over the remaining pension assets. Once completed, the original transaction trail will be absorbed into a new administrative entity. An attorney examined the red sheet. Can the order be stopped? Yes. How the council must revoke executive finance authority before 11:30. Then the pension bank requires a replacement signatory with independent audit power. Every eye turned toward Matteo. He remained standing behind Evelyn, rather than taking the central chair. What happens to the payroll batch? Salvatore asked. I can release legitimate wages tonight. Evelyn said, but I will not do it under the existing structure. Adrian laughed bitterly. There it is. She wants money. Evelyn looked at him. I already accepted a better paying job. She wants status. Then, I want the system to stop, requiring one invisible woman to repair the damage caused by protected men. No one laughed. Matteo stepped forward. What structure do you require? Evelyn did not turn toward him. An independent payroll and compliance office. Granted. I have not finished. The old Matteo would have felt challenged in front of his captains. The man standing behind her felt pride. Continue. He said, the office reports to the full council, not executive finance. Its director holds signature authority over payroll, pension transfers, and employee insurance accounts. Granted, it has the power to suspend any transaction that lacks a documented source. Granted, compliance staff cannot be dismissed by finance alone. Granted, and every captain, including you, is subject to the same audit process. A murmur moved around the table. Matteo met her eyes, especially me. Adrian pushed back his chair. You are giving a payroll clerk authority over the Bellandi family. Matteo looked at him. No. I am recognizing the authority she was already exercising while you stole from us. He addressed the council. 3 days ago, Miss Hart attempted to warn this room. Adrian insulted her. I allowed it because hearing her would have inconvenienced me. Several men lowered their gazes. That failure belongs to me. Her abduction began with Adrian. But the system that made her vulnerable existed under my leadership. Evelyn watched him carefully. Matteo continued, I will not ask this council to trust my judgment, while pretending my judgment did not fail. He removed the Bellandi signet ring from his right hand and set it on the table. If the council believes that failure disqualifies me, vote accordingly. But whether I remain in this chair or not, Evelyn Hart will finish speaking without interruption. For the first time that evening, Adrian appeared afraid, not of Matteo's anger, of his accountability. Men like Adrian understood force. Force could be predicted, resisted, or redirected. Public truth removed the shadows they needed to survive. Salvatore Marino looked toward Evelyn. What consequence do you recommend for executive finance? Adrian stared at her. He expected cruelty, because cruelty was the only form of power he respected. Evelyn closed the folder. Freeze every account under his authority. Remove his access to company systems and pension assets. Place him under council security until an external forensic review identifies every recipient and recovers the funds. Adrian's mouth twisted. You want me handed to outsiders? I want the workers' money returned. You think Matteo will permit strangers to examine Bellandi accounts? The room turned toward him. Matteo did not hesitate. She asked for an external review. She will have one. Adrian's final shield disappeared. He moved suddenly, reaching inside his jacket. Gabriel and 2 guards crossed the distance before his hand cleared the fabric. They forced his arms behind him and removed a compact pistol. No shot was fired. No blood touched the ballroom floor. Adrian struggled once, then stopped when he realized no one at the table intended to defend him. Matteo looked at Evelyn. The consequence is yours to confirm. She drew a slow breath. Remove him. Gabriel escorted Adrian toward the doors. As he passed Evelyn, Adrian leaned close enough to speak. You will never belong in this room. Evelyn met his eyes. I no longer need to belong to it. She looked at the captains. It needs to answer to me. Salvatore rose first. He pulled out the chair beside Matteo's and turned it toward Evelyn. Then's it. Honor be won. The other captains stood. Some did so from respect. Some from shame. Others because they had understood. Finally, that the organization could not function without the systems she controlled. Evelyn placed one hand on the chair. I have not accepted the position. Matteo felt the old fear return. Not the fear of losing authority, the fear that she would leave and he would deserve the empty space she created. He kept his hands at his sides. What would allow you to consider it? He asked. A written charter. You will have it. Authority to choose my own staff. Yes. Full restoration of the pension fund before any leadership distributions. Yes. No guard assigned to me without my consent. Matteo paused only long enough to understand the cost. Yes. No tracking my phone. No deciding where I live. No gifts used as substitutes for apologies. Yes. And if I refuse dinner, a relationship, or anything else you ask of me, my professional authority remains unchanged. Every person in the room understood what she was saying. Matteo did not look away. Yes. Evelyn's voice softened slightly. You agree quickly. I have had 3 years to want you, and one day to understand that wanting you gives me no rights over you. The captains became intensely interested in the documents before them. Evelyn looked down at the chair. I will serve as interim director for 90 days. Hope moved through Matteo's chest, but he held it carefully. After 90 days, I decide whether the position deserves me. A faint smile touched his mouth. That seems fair. It is not intended to be fair. It is intended to be accurate. Matteo's smile deepened. Evelyn shot. The status marker was small enough that an outsider might have missed it. For years, documents had been handed past her to men with titles. Now the pension attorney placed the revocation order directly in front of Evelyn and waited for her instruction. She reviewed every page. At 11:12, the council revoked Adrian's authority. At 11:19, Evelyn became the independent signatory for the pension fund. At 11:27, the consolidation order was cancelled, 3 minutes before the deadline. 400 retired workers kept the money they had spent lifetimes earning. At midnight, legitimate payroll cleared. No one cheered. The men around the table simply watched Evelyn close her laptop and understood that the Bellandi system had not been saved by violence, inheritance, or fear. It had been saved by a woman they had repeatedly asked to remain quiet. The ballroom emptied after 2 in the morning. Evelyn stood beside the windows, looking down at the harbor lights. Exhaustion had softened the hard line of her shoulders. Matteo remained near the table. He had spent the final hour answering questions, but had not approached her. When they were alone, Evelyn turned. "You may come closer." Matteo crossed the room slowly. He stopped an arm's length away. "How do you feel?" "My ribs hurt. My head hurts. I have resigned and accepted a new job while somehow becoming interim director of the company I resigned from." "That sounds complicated." "It is." "Do you regret staying?" Evelyn considered the question. "No." Relief entered his expression. She lifted one finger. "That does not mean I stayed for you." "I know. I stayed for the employees." "I know. And because Adrian believed fear would make me surrender the truth." "I know." She searched his face. "You keep agreeing with me." "I am practicing." Despite herself, she laughed. The sound was quiet and tired, but it changed the room. Matteo had heard her laugh before from across the payroll floor. He had never been close enough to feel the warmth of it. His eyes filled again. Evelyn's amusement faded. "You cried when you found me." "Yes. I did not think men like you cried. Men like me make certain no one sees it." Gabriel saw. He is pretending he did not. And now I am finished, pretending you do not have the power to break my heart. Evelyn looked toward the harbor. "You said you love me." "Yes." "Do you?" "Expect an answer." "No." "Do you want one?" "More than I have wanted anything." She faced him again. "That is not the same as being ready to hear it." Matteo absorbed the distinction. "No. You loved an idea of me from a distance. The quiet woman who never asked you for anything. The person who repaired your systems and made your life easier. That is true. You do not yet know the woman who becomes angry. Tu refuses invitation. Changes her mind. Or chooses work over you. I would like to. You may not like her. I am not asking for someone easy to like. What are you asking for? A chance to know you without using power to keep you near me." Evelyn studied him. "And what happens when I say no, I go home alone? What happens the next morning? You still hold signature authority. And if I accept the Providence position after 90 days, I help you pack, if you ask me to." The answer reached somewhere beneath her caution. Her eyes shone, but her voice remained steady. "That is the first romantic thing you have said tonight. Not the declaration of love. No, the offer to respect the consequences of it." Matteo nodded slowly. "I have much to learn." "Yes, you do. May I take you home? You may ask Gabriel to arrange a car. May I ride with you?" No. The refusal hurt. He allowed it to exist without punishment. "All right." Evelyn watched his face, perhaps waiting for the command hidden beneath the request. None came. "I need silence," she explained. "You do not owe me an explanation." "I know." He walked with her to the elevator, but did not enter. When the doors opened, Gabriel stood inside. Evelyn stepped across the threshold, then turned. "Matteo." "Yes, Ask me to dinner after the pension money is restored. His heart moved once, hard against his ribs. When will that be? If your recovery team is competent, 6 weeks. They will become extremely competent. The elevator doors closed on the first genuine smile she had given him. Over the next 6 weeks, the Bellandi organization changed in ways no threat could have achieved. Evelyn moved the compliance department from the basement to the executive floor. She chose a corner office with 2 windows, not because it was the largest, but because employees could reach it without passing through finance. She hired 3 analysts, promoted the assistant who had found her handbag, and required every executive to attend payroll accountability training. 2 captains objected. Evelyn suspended their discretionary accounts until they completed it. They attended the next morning. Matteo never reversed one of her decisions. He sat through the same training as everyone else. When an instructor asked him to explain the difference between gross wages and total labor cost, he gave the wrong answer. Evelyn corrected him in front of 30 employees. He wrote down the correction. The story traveled across the waterfront before lunch. Matteo's public behavior accomplished what private apologies could not. Managers stopped treating Evelyn's authority as a temporary favor granted by a man in love. They began recognizing it as a structural fact. The pension recovery took 38 days. External auditors traced nearly every missing dollar. Properties, purchased through Adrian's holding companies, were sold. Frozen consulting payments were returned. Leadership distributions remained suspended until the retirees' accounts were whole. On the 39th day, Evelyn received confirmation that every pension balance had been restored. At 5:30, someone knocked on her open office door. Matteo stood in the hallway holding no flowers, jewelry, or extravagant gift. He carried 2 paper cups of tea. "You remembered," she said. "I remember most things about you. That line is dangerously close to surveillance." He stopped. Evelyn let him worry for 2 seconds before taking 1 cup. It was a joke. "I am still learning those." I noticed. Matteo waited outside the office. "Evelyn Hart, the pension fund has been restored. Would you have dinner with me?" She took a sip. "Where?" "Anywhere you choose. No private dining room filled with armed men." "Agreed. No restaurant your family owns." "Agreed. No driver waiting outside to report when I leave." "Agreed. And no calling me yours." His expression became serious. "You are not mine. What am I free?" The words settled between them. Evelyn placed the tea on her desk. "Dinner at 7. Matteo exhaled. "Tonight, you waited 6 weeks. I assumed you had a plan." "I had 17 plans. You eliminated 14 of them in the last 30 seconds. Then choose from the remaining 3. They ate at a small Italian restaurant in Cambridge, where the owner did not know Matteo's name. He sat across from Evelyn without guards in the room. Gabriel remained 3 blocks away because Evelyn had approved that distance. They talked about ordinary things. She told him she had grown up above her father's hardware store and learned bookkeeping because he trusted memory more than receipts. She described a 12-year marriage that ended when her husband announced that her steadiness made him feel unnecessary. Matteo told her his mother had loved opera and hated the Bellandi business. He admitted that after her death, he learned to confuse control with safety, because control was the only thing that had prevented more funerals. Evelyn did not excuse him. She listened. At the end of the evening, Matteo walked her to her car. "May I kiss you?" he asked. "Not tonight." He nodded. "Did I fail the dinner?" "No." "Then why not?" "Because I want to know whether you remain this respectful tomorrow." "That is a long evaluation period." 90 days. Matteo smiled. "You like that number? It creates measurable expectations." On the 89th day of Evelyn's interim term, the Bellandi Council met again. This time, her name appeared on the agenda before every captain's. Her written charter lay at each seat. The document granted her permanent audit authority, voting power on financial operations, the right to suspend transactions, and legal independence from executive finance. Salvatore called the meeting to order. The council has reviewed the charter. We are prepared to approve it unanimously. Evelyn looked toward Matteo. He sat at the head of the table, but made no attempt to answer for her. Salvatore continued. Will you accept the permanent position? Evelyn opened the folder containing her Providence contract. For months, it had represented escape, dignity, and proof that another institution saw her value. She still wanted the freedom it represented. That was precisely why her next choice mattered. I spoke with Halpern this morning. She said they agreed to keep me as an external advisor for 2 days each month. Matteo's posture changed almost imperceptibly. Evelyn continued. I will accept the permanent Bellandi position under the charter before you. The council approved it. An attorney placed a pen beside the signature line. Evelyn did not pick it up immediately. One additional condition. Salvatore raised an eyebrow. It was a very thorough charter. This condition is not for the council. She looked at Matteo. The next time I warn you that something is wrong, you stop the room and listen. I will. You ask questions before choosing convenience. I will. And when you fail, you admit it, before someone has to bleed for the truth. Matteo's eyes moved briefly to the faint remaining shadow beneath her cheekbone. I will. Evelyn signed. The council members added their signatures below hers. Matteo signed last. When the meeting ended, he remained seated while the others left. Evelyn closed the folder. 90 days. She said, Yes. You respected every boundary. I counted. You never followed me without permission. No. You accepted 3 rejected dinner invitations. 4. The opera did not count. You knew I dislike opera. I was testing whether you would say no. That sounds suspiciously like an excuse. It is the best one I have. Evelyn walked around the table. Matteo stood. They faced each other in the same room where he had once allowed Adrian to dismiss her. Now her signature governed every financial decision made inside it. Do you still love me? She asked. Yes. Which version? The woman who corrects me in public. The woman who leaves meetings when men waste her time. The woman who chooses work over dinner and sometimes chooses dinner over work. The woman who is kind without being obedient. He paused. And the woman who could still leave. Evelyn rested one hand against the front of his jacket. Matteo did not move. I love you too, she said. The words did not rescue him from what he had done. They did not erase the basement office, the ignored warnings, or the moment she had been left alone with danger. They gave him something harder than forgiveness. A standard he would have to keep meeting. May I kiss you now? He asked. Yes. Matteo touched her face with both hands, careful of the place where the bruise had finally faded. He waited until she leaned toward him. Their kiss was quiet. There was no audience, no declaration of ownership, and no applause from a room of men. Only 2 adults standing on equal ground, choosing the same moment freely. Months later, employees entering the executive floor passed 2 offices with equal-sized brass nameplates. Matteo Bellandi, Chief Executive. Evelyn Hart, Director of Compliance and Counsel, Signatory. No one called her the payroll clerk again. When captains wanted emergency funds, they waited for Evelyn's decision. When managers proposed new contracts, her department reviewed them first. When workers had questions about pensions, the answers arrived before Friday. Matteo still protected her when danger required it. But he no longer confused protection with control. He asked, she decided. Sometimes her answer was yes. Sometimes it was no. Both answers remained safe. One evening, nearly a year after the custom station, Matteo waited in Evelyn's doorway while she finished reviewing a report. "You are staring," she said, without looking up. "I am waiting." For what permission to interrupt? Evelyn removed her glasses. One arm had been professionally repaired. Though she had kept the narrow black line where the original frame had broken. Matteo once asked why she had not replaced them. She told him the mark reminded her that surviving something did not require pretending it had never happened. Now she closed the report. "You may interrupt. I made dinner. You employ a chef. I dismissed him for the evening. Why? Because I wanted to cook for you." Evelyn stood and collected her coat. "Is the kitchen still intact?" "Mostly." "That is not reassuring." Matteo offered his hand. He did not take hers. He waited. Evelyn slipped her fingers into his. The man who once believed love meant ordering an entire city to bring her back had finally learned a quieter form of devotion. He could open the door. He could offer his hand. He could tell the truth. But Evelyn would always decide whether to walk beside him. And that freedom, the one thing he could never purchase, command, or take, was what made her love worth receiving. If you had been Evelyn, would you have taken the safe job in Providence? Or returned to protect the workers who once depended on your invisible labor?